I was asked by a follower, what advice would I give them if they can't afford to be my client? And here's my response. So a few days ago, a follower asked me on email, I can't afford to be your client, but what advice would you give me in my shoes? He's a relatively young guy who's new to investing, but he has some money to invest. He's also looking to start his own business. Now, here's my response. Obviously, it's a very broad question, and I only have so much time on this video, but I'll split it up into two sections: investing and business. So in investing, I said to him, just invest every single month or periodically into the S&P 500 or MSCI and make that the bulk of your portfolio when you're young. When you're older, you can also add a bond market index and be more diversified. If you really want to speculate, put maybe 10% into something which is like that, but don't speculate. Just invest continuously over a period of time into the major indexes and you'll do just fine. Once you've got enough money where advice could become useful, you can reach out to me or indeed somebody else, and you can get access to more sophisticated assets as well as behavioral training and things like that, because a lot of the research says that people panic sell when the markets go down and things like that. So there's definitely a place for advice, but probably at this stage in your life, you shouldn't need advice. But there will come a time when you probably do need advice. Now, in the meantime, make sure that when it comes to alternative assets, you avoid them. Once you're wealthier and you have access to an advisor, that's where alternative assets can really add a huge amount to your financial picture, and there's a lot of benefits to them. But having a good advisor who can assess the risk properly is very important. I also told him to avoid this typical mentality, which is save up for a deposit, buy a house and use all your money for housing. That's common in the UK, it's common in many Asian countries. So I said to him, avoid that. In addition to that, when it comes to business, there's certain basic things that anyone can keep to. Number one, get good at something and then start a business. Trying to be the next Zuckerberg or somebody who started a business at 19 or 20 from their grandma's house or their mum's basement is very unlikely. So start with a job, see the problems, see what's wrong with the industry and the company, get experience, get good at it, and then start your own business. Number two, take as many calculated risks as possible and even as many big risks as possible when you're young enough to take those risks. When you're 35 or 40 or 50, you're going to have more responsibilities. When you're 25 or 27, you can afford to take more risk. Also, in addition to that, make sure you don't get into group thinking. So in the UK, we call it the Westminster bubble, where a lot of politicians and journalists all talk to each other and they get into this habit of being out of touch with the public because they only have conversations with people in the industry. And in the finance industry, it's very much like that. So try to speak to people in different industries, which leads me on to another thing. If you read a lot and you speak to people in different industries, you're more likely to think like a contrarian. You're more likely to break industry norms, break standards of doing things. And if you get yourself out of your comfort zone, you're more likely to succeed. But if you do what everybody else is doing, it's less likely to work. So for me, the big break that I had was going online in 2018 when everyone thought in my industry, you should actually meet people face to face. But then everyone come 2020 or 2021 thought I was a visionary, right? Because I did that. But in reality, business was always going to go online. So think about what the future might hold. Nobody can predict the future, but you can think, what could the future hold? And what are people in my industry not doing at the moment? What are people in my industry doing which seems old and tired? And that kind of leads me on to another thing. When it comes to dealing with providers, whether it's banking providers, investing providers or others, I found time and time again that the legacy companies are the worst to deal with. So dealing with the HSBCs of this world is going to be much worse than dealing with a challenger bank or EMI, like Wise or Revolut. I've just been asked to give a recommendation to one of our banks, or should I say EMIs, and I was happy to do that because they're so much better than the traditional banks. But why are they better? Because trying to move a speedboat or turn around a speedboat is much easier than moving an oil tanker. So the more you deal with these legacy companies, legacy banks, legacy financial institutions, legacy legal institutions, the more you're going to be disappointed. So if you start your own business, that means make those challenger banks your first priority. Don't think I'm only going to use the challenger banks if I can't get a traditional bank. They should be your first priority. You should want to avoid the traditional banks. Likewise, if you want a lawyer or a law firm to represent you, consider using a law firm that's been in place for 5 or 10 or 15 years, not one that's been in place for 100 years, because they're not going to have as many legacy issues. And the reason we grow so much, or have grown so much, should I say, in the 5.5 years since we've operated, is we don't have that huge legacy problem, because I've been in the financial services industry for over 10 years. I started my own business in 2018. And likewise, that can be your big advantage if you go into business. You might not have the budget of HSBC or Goldman Sachs or the big, I don't know, hotels or whatever industry you're going into, but you can see things from a fresh perspective. You can do things differently. You can make the competition uncomfortable by doing things in a different way. You can be very agile to change. If there's a pandemic or a war or anything that happens, you can make a decision instantly, which leads me to a final thing. And in general, I would say don't go into business with loads of business partners, because what I would call, ironically, the dictatorship structure, one owner, one shareholder, one decision maker, actually, believe it or not, when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses, works much better than having loads of partners, because your advantage over the bigger competition, one of your advantages is speed of movement and the ability to adapt.
Anyways, I'm very, very pleased and positive to say that I believe I've picked the right one. The results in the last couple of years have overreached my expectations by far. And I see no reason why it should not continue. Of course, I can highly recommend him as your financial advisor for now and for the future, because hesitating is missing out.
Obviously, the best result in market right now is Adam.